Welcome to this session of the Post-COVID Condition Therapeutic Education Program. This session will be on return to work and school. My name is Peggy and I'm the occupational therapist. During this session, we will review the considerations for return to work, when it is appropriate, the types of accommodations or recommendations that are needed, how to prepare for return to work, and think through what you might want to share with your colleagues. Considerations for return to work and school are quite similar. It's important to look at how you're able to manage your daily routine. Are you able to be consistent in how much you're able to manage from day to day? It's possible that you might still be having bad days and some crashes, but they're less frequent and less severe. When you do feel fatigued, you are still able to complete the majority of your daily tasks. You have the ability to stabilize your symptoms and have had a consistent level of activity and generally feel well. It's important to think about the demands of the job that you're trying to return to. What are the physical demands? Does your job require a lot of heavy lifting, operating of machinery? Is it physically demanding in terms of how far you have to walk each day? It's also important to consider the cognitive demands of your job. How much concentration is required? Do you have to be able to operate at a high level of concentration, multitasking? Do you have to communicate consistently? What types of problem solving do you have to do? Is there a lot of attention to detail, or do you have to generate a lot of solutions and ideas in your work? The emotional challenges are also worth considering. Some jobs are very high stress where you're constantly dealing with putting out fires, emergencies, dealing with other people's anger, frustration. It's also possible your job has a lot of deadlines that you need to meet and metrics as well. How do you get to work? If you spend a lot of time and energy on your commute, you're likely to be more tired and be worn out before you even begin your workday. Is there any travel associated with the work that you do? Do you have to hop on a plane early in the morning, spend the day in New York City, and fly back in the evening? Do you do a lot of travel across the globe, switching time zones? And after considering all of these areas, it might be possible that you cannot return to your job. When thinking about accommodations for return to work, the Realize article highlights these 8 different areas. If you want further details, you can click the link in the slides and read the article for yourself. We will talk through each of these in more detail. It's important to note that post-COVID condition, or long COVID, is an episodic disability. This means that it's a chronic condition with periods of wellness and illness that can vary in severity, length, and predictability from one person to another. Simply said, that just means that your symptoms can come and go, and they're not always consistent. There can be periods of time when you feel really well and periods of time when symptoms become flared up and you have periods of increased illness and decreased function. When considering recommendations for return to work, note that sometimes these need to be explicitly discussed and outlined with your employer, but in some situations, they could be adaptations you make to your own schedule. This will vary depending on your work situation. One thing to look for is a prolonged and gradual return to work plan. Most return to work plans are about 8 to 12 weeks before they expect that you'd be back at full schedule and full workload. For a lot of people with long COVID, this is too short a time period, and many have found that they require a longer and slower pace of return in order to manage their symptoms. Suitable workplace accommodations can look like making sure you have a proper workstation setup, that it's ergonomic and supportive of your body, that it reduces risk for injury or pain, looking at sitting as much as you can instead of standing, understanding that standing is really exertional and requires much more energy. When it comes to screen use, if you've got sensitivities, these types of accommodations may look like reducing your screen time, turning off your camera, making adjustments to the screen itself, maybe the environment that you're in to make screens more manageable, but definitely pacing that time. And helpful to consider other equipment that is going to make your job a little bit easier and decrease your energy output. When looking at flexible hours, consider maybe a different start time. Some people find that getting up and ready for a 9 to 5 workday is really challenging and have found that starting perhaps at 10 o'clock may make the day more manageable. As you increase in your work days, think about working every other day as opposed to 3 days in a row and having 2 days off. It's about pacing your work throughout the week. If you're someone that does shift work, perhaps an accommodation is that you avoid night shifts so that you can protect your rest and sleep. Also, might be worth considering how many hours you work per day as you increase your return to work plan. For most people with long COVID, remote work is going to be really helpful as it eliminates the exertion of that commute. It also reduces the number of social interactions that you have to do when you work from home, and also limits the environmental stimuli that you might come across, whether it's just background noise or people walking around or not having control over the lighting in your office. And working home from can also mean that you're able to lie down for your breaks a little easier than you might in an office setting. Consider how you might reduce the physical or cognitive workload. What are the weights of the loads that you need to move? Is there a lot of repetitive movements? What is your standing or walking tolerance? How can you decrease that in the work that you do? It might mean looking at reducing your targets for the day or week, the number of cases you have to manage or get through when you first return to work. Also think about how you manage the demands of communication. In your job, is there constant emails coming in? Are you on the phone all the time? What about all the messages from coworkers and colleagues? How are you able to manage the multiple streams of information? When first returning to work, think about asking for altered tasks or more time to complete your tasks. Speak to your manager about the essential tasks of your job. Is there a way to change the responsibilities that you have, perhaps starting with fewer responsibilities than you might have had previously? Consider how you might be able to delegate some of the tasks to other team members. And having more time to complete your tasks or extended deadlines can be really helpful in decreasing the amount of stress that you feel. As we've talked about in other sessions, think about how you plan your most demanding tasks for when you have the most energy. If you have the flexibility, plan your presentations, really involved problem-solving meetings, or if you have to lead a meeting, try to plan those for when you have the most energy, Maybe avoid planning things like that back to back as much as possible, or splitting them up over every other day in a week. As part of the culture of your team, maybe consider scheduling shorter meetings so that everybody can get a break. And when thinking about screen time for remote work, look at not having to use your camera, dialing into meetings so you can listen versus sitting up at the computer, and perhaps preparing ahead of time. So printing off your documents or the minutes or the schedule to read before you head into a meeting. For rest time accommodations, really look at frequent breaks throughout the day. Pacing is what's going to help you manage your energy best, and it's helpful if your employer can support this. When looking at the work week, again, consider working that every other day schedule as opposed to having days in a row. Look at your schedule and make specific time for breaks and rests in between appointments. Perhaps you do 45 or 50-minute appointments with a 10-minute break before the next one or next task that you have to get to. Longer meetings will need breaks. It's good for you, but probably good for everybody on your team as well. If you're someone that looks at your schedule and sticks to it quite well, definitely schedule in your lunch breaks so that you don't get other things slotted in. Remembering to eat lunch is going to give you the energy that you need for the rest of your day. When it comes to rest for your eyes, for every 20 minutes you're on the screen, it's good to look away at a further distance to give your eyes something else to focus on, and this can help fatigue overall. Here's an example of what it's like for a teacher as they return to work. Requesting that you only teach classes you've taught before, so you can reduce the new learning and the new creation of materials that's often required on your own time. You don't want to have to spend a lot of your time learning a new curriculum. It might mean reducing the number of classes or courses that you're teaching and you're not teaching at full time. Requesting that your classroom be on the first floor so you can limit the number of times you're up and down on the stairs in a school day. Not carrying items in your arms, so using a wheeled cart or a trolley to carry materials around your classroom or the school itself. Not be required to do yard duty or supervise extracurricular activities, as these are things that are going to increase your overall exertion. For someone that's really sensitive to overhead lighting or fluorescent lighting, consider leaving the lights off in your classroom or perhaps installing light filters to decrease that input. Think about how you set up your classroom. What are the things that you use most often? Where are you placing them? Really try to minimize repetitive movements, especially ones that are more extreme, including bending over repeatedly or reaching up high. Try to keep things between your waist and your neck, so sort of at chest height or waist height. Sit to teach wherever possible. Again, taking a load off your body will help manage your energy. And have students come to you as opposed to you traveling around the classroom. And some people have even considered wheeled office chairs in the classroom so that they can wheel around instead of walking around. And think about how you use your class time. Perhaps you teach a short lesson, allow for some independent work, and then come back together to address any questions. And that way you get a little break in the rhythm of your class. For somebody who works for Canada Post, returning to work might look like not having to do night shifts. If there's someone that had shifts at different points of the day, requesting no night shifts, again, is going to help protect their sleep and their rest. Perhaps limiting the number of shifts that you're required to take in a week and even looking at reducing the hours required per shift. And during the busy seasons, when everyone's asked to take on extra shifts, perhaps that's something you ask for, that you're not obligated to increase the number of shifts you have in a week. Altering your task or changing your task. So this person, or if someone was had to walk around the plant a lot, moving different carts, perhaps now they sit and do sorting in one area as opposed to doing a lot of walking around the facility. Outside of work, it might mean looking at asking for help with taking kids to extracurricular activities so that they're not needed for that task at the end of a workday. It might also mean limiting your social activities on the weekend so that you can protect that time for rest. And consider how family can help with things like meals and household tasks. When preparing for return to work, it's good to acknowledge that those first number of weeks or perhaps even months can be very challenging and more tiring than you might think. It's good to plan ahead and give yourself the best chance of success. Review and prioritize your other tasks and responsibilities outside of work. What are some activities that you may have to let go of or maybe not do for now? Have a discussion with friends and family about your needs as you make that transition back to work. Let them know that you anticipate you're not going to be able to do as much around the house and perhaps how they might be able to step in to support you. For help with those household tasks like meals and cleaning, if that's something you're doing at the moment when you're not working. It's likely that as you make that transition, it's going to be harder to get to some of those tasks at the end of the workday. Many people also find that they need a rest period at the end of the workday so that they can manage their evening. So perhaps it's a half-hour lie down in a dark room before you jump into helping with homework and making dinner. In preparing for a return to work, it's also helpful to look at your schedule. Perhaps you can adjust to when you would expect you would need to get up, when you would need to go to bed, and when your rests might be as you return to work. It might be helpful to simulate some of your work tasks or demands so you know ahead of time where you might need some accommodation. So if you do a lot of reading and writing of emails, try to do some of that now. See how long it takes you, how long can you do it for, and it'll give you some idea as to how it might be when you return to work. If you have to work with a lot of data, perhaps try reviewing some spreadsheets and see what that experience is like. It'll give you some ideas as to where you might need some more support, or you might find that you actually manage that quite well. Spend time reading or doing work on a screen and see if you need any accommodations or how much you can tolerate at a time. It'll give you an idea as to how you might want to pace your work when you return. If you work in an office environment with open cubicles, maybe try having a conversation with a bit of background noise. It'll give you an idea as to what's most helpful when you're interacting with colleagues in the office. As you return to work, it's going to be harder to stay connected with others socially. So try to make a plan for that ahead of time. It's important to feel connected as it really does support your mental health. Ask your family and friends to check in with you, maybe with a text or a voicemail or voice notes. And you can listen to them when you can or you are available. If you talk on the phone, let them know you might need to keep it short. Lie down so that you don't have to spend energy sitting, and reduce other stimuli by doing it in a dark room. Some people have found it helpful just to share space with a friend or family member. They don't necessarily have to engage in a conversation or even do an activity together, but it's nice to have somebody in the room with you and sharing your space. As you return to work, it's important to think about what you want to share with your colleagues. What do you plan to say? How much do you want to share? And perhaps what are some of the words that you want to use? Are you able to identify an ally at your workplace? It might be helpful to connect with them before your return. Let them know what's been happening, the struggles you have, and how they can support you through them. For some people, their managers have been their ally. They've said that they've had very supportive managers who've supported them through very challenging days and situations. As in other spaces in life, you might find that not everyone's going to respond positively to the things that you have to share. This is unfortunate, but you're not able to control how somebody responds to what you share. Just make note of who your allies are, and if people are open to learning more, then think about the types of resources you want to share with them. The question that sometimes people ask themselves is, should I keep working? Some people have continued to work as they're managing long COVID. Some have returned and are slowly increasing their hours. But with both situations, you might find that it becomes harder to keep up with other aspects of your life. Some questions to consider might be how you're managing the demands of your job. Perhaps you already have some accommodations in place, but you're still finding it really challenging to manage certain aspects of your job. Perhaps you've been working this whole time and you haven't had any accommodations, and it might be time to consider those. What are your roles and responsibilities outside of work? Are you a parent who has to manage taking care of young kids at the end of a workday? Are you a single parent who perhaps has to do all the other chores around the house at the end of the workday? How is that impacting your ability to fulfill those roles? Some people have found that they've had to take time off as these other roles have taken precedence over being able to work. And how often are you experiencing post-exertion malaise? Are these episodes increasing in frequency and severity as you've tried to keep up with work? Have you been able to have adequate rest to recover from these episodes? And are you experiencing any new symptoms with the hours of work that you're trying to keep? Some people find that as they increase in hours, they've also noted perhaps an onset of shortness of breath, or perhaps it resolved earlier and has now returned. These are indications that your body's likely not tolerating your level of activity. It's helpful to keep your doctor informed of how you're managing as you return to work or as you've continued to work, so that they can support you if you require a pause in your return to work plan, or perhaps you need to ask for accommodations for the first time or time off. In summary, consider return to work when you have some consistency in how you manage daily activities without triggering post-exertion malaise. Consider the demands of the type of work you're trying to return to and what types of accommodations can support you in that role. Plan ahead for your transition back to work and consider how to manage your other roles and responsibilities. And it may be necessary to pause your return to work plan if you experience an increase in symptoms and increase in post-exertion malaise episodes. If you're a student, there are further slides on the handout that will provide some information on how to access supports through the accessibility office at your institution. There is a standard procedure for students. You would just need your doctor to fill out a form to support you in that process. Thank you.